You all right there, Mom?
Yeah, I'm okay, honey.
Okay. All right. Make sure we don't have any background noise here. All right. Shalom, everyone. Shabbat shalom. Hope you guys are having a great Shabbat in Yahuwah and Yahusha. We are the Waken by Yahuwah Assembly. My name is Brother Doug. My mom, Sister Sharon, is sitting next to me over here. We have Brother Dennis, Brother Yahusha with us. We might at some point have Sister Marissa join us at some point, so we'll see. Let's see here. Okay, yeah. Thanks, Mom. All right, so let me just double check. My microphone seems to be doing very well here. All right, so I'll try to hold it there. Okay, so we're on the recording right now. We're on YouTube. Let me get us going here with our regular Shabbat reading. We will be doing 1 Samuel 29 to 30. Okay, so here we go. All right, I'll start us off here. And the Philistines gathered all their armies in Endor, which is in Jezreel, and the masters of the Philistines went on by thousands. Thanks, Mom. And Daoud and his men went in on the rear from Achish. And the masters of the Philistines said, "Who? These pass by." And Achish said to the captains of the Philistines, "Not this Daoud, the servant of Shaul, king of Yashrael, has been with us some time this second year, and I have not found any fault in him from the day that he attached himself to me, even until this day." And the captains of the Philistines were displeased at him, and they said to him, "Send the man away and let him return from to his place, which you have appointed him, and let him not come with us to war, and let him not be a traitor in the camp. With what will he be reconciled to his master? Will it not be with the heads of those men? Not this Daoud whom they celebrate and dance, saying, Shaul has killed his thousands, Daoud his tens thousands." Mom, did we read 29 last week? This sounds very familiar.
Yeah, sounding very
Yeah,
familiar.
I might have to fix that because it seems like.
Yeah, I think that was done last week.
All right. My bad, everyone. My bad. All right, let's fast forward to chapter 30 then if we did that last week. So actually it should be 30 and 31. My fault about that.
You did 29 and 30 last week.
Oh, really? Okay. Let me just double check.
Right, he's right about that. Yep.
Huh. Because it says 27 to 29 last week.
Oh no, you're right. I'm sorry. I'm looking at the I was looking
Okay.
at the live on YouTube.
Okay. No worries. Yeah, so 27 and 29. So I guess we just got these last two chapters then. Okay. And it came to pass when Daoud and his men, chapter 30 here, had entered Ziklag on the third day, Amalek had made an incursion. Find it interesting they use the word incursion there. Upon the south and upon Ziklag, and attacked Ziklag and burned it with fire. Now, Amalek, Mom, isn't that one of the tribe of the giants, Amalek, the Amalekites?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so I want to make a note about that. So the Amalekites. 1 Samuel 30, verse 1, Amalek. So, verse 2, as to woman and all the things that were in it, great and small, they killed neither man nor woman, but carried them away captive and went on their way. Now, that is interesting. So I guess because the Amalekites were not commanded to be utterly wiped out, I would want to look back at that if.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. Yeah.
But I think they're not one of the 7 tribes that they were told to wipe them out. So technically, this is righteous for them to do so, unless Yahuwah doesn't want them to take what's under the ban or something. That would be the only reason that would be wicked to do that. And Daud and his men came into the city, and behold, it was burned with fire. Their wives, their sons, and their daughters were carried away captive. Okay, so you have. So interesting. Daud and his men lifted up their voice and wept till there was no longer any power within them. And both wives of Daud were carried away captive, Ahinoam the Jezreelitess, and Abigail, the wife of Nabal the Carmelite. So interesting. Oh, go ahead, brother. Sure.
I think you misread. Because it's the Amalekites that are not killing man or woman, taking them captive.
Oh, okay. Okay, thanks for the clarification.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was my bad, guys. So yeah, since they're the Amalekites, I mean that's different. So what's interesting here though is they're taking Dawood's wives captive and they're kidnapping them and also burning the city down. So there's casualties here. It looks like a lot of Israelites were killed. Because it was burned with fire. Their wives, their sons, and their daughters were taken away captive. Daud and his men lifted up their voice, wept till there was no longer any power within them to weep. And both the wives of Daud were taken away captive. So we just read about that. We read about Abigail and the other Jezreelitess there. So what's weird, Mom, is they're still calling Abigail the wife of Nabal.
It says widow in my Bible, widow of Nabal.
I'm looking at all of them say wife.
Really?
Yeah. Vulgate says wife. King James says wife. Septuagint says wife. So yeah, they're still considering her his wife. Probably because the term widow might have not came into the English language until much later.
Okay.
So they're still considering that a wife. They're just considering that he's dead now. Go ahead, brother Yahusha.
Probably they're just doing that as a clarification, because if it just said Abigail into the, if the reader hadn't read, a couple chapters before, they wouldn't make the connection. But because I don't think she would legally be his wife anymore now that he's dead.
Nah.
For us, so probably just for clarification purposes.
Yeah.
Right about that.
Yeah. Just see her. And I think too the English language, I don't know if they had a specific word for widow back then. I know a lot of the older Bibles, there's certain words that maybe they didn't have a word to distinguish wife from widow. Yeah, this is the problem. Even with the Hebrew language, gune, it can mean a woman of any age, whether a virgin or married or a widow. So, yeah, it's very hard with certain languages like the Hebrew language. This one word can be used for a wife, a betrothed woman, a woman married, even a widow or a virgin. So it's very. I can see why it was hard for them to translate that correctly.
But if she's remarried, she wouldn't be a widow.
Yeah, it's true.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. It really should have just been translated woman, is what it seems like. Yeah,
I think like in Hebrew, like rather than actually being called wife or husband, they're called like his woman or her man.
Yeah, because it's Isha right here in the Hebrew. Woman is like number one definition. Woman opposite of man. Yeah, wife is like the third definition. So yeah, in their culture too, like you said, they would just say that's his woman or that's her man. Like it's funny because in Ebonics that's how we say it, but that's really how they would have said it in the ancient cultures. The word wife and husband is a very modern invention, word, vocabulary wise. It's not, you wouldn't see that in ancient Semitic languages, to Brother Yahusha's point. So yeah, that's what gets confusing too. Um okay, so we're at I think verse 6 here. And Daud greatly distressed because of the people spoke of stoning him, because the souls of all the people were grieved, each for his sons and his daughters. But Daud strengthened himself in Yahuwah his Alua. Yeah, wow, that's weird. Go ahead, Brother Yahusha.
It's crazy. Our people just got kidnapped. Let's stone our leader. It's his fault.
Yeah. I think this is why Yahusha did what he did. I kind of wonder if he did what he did with the woman in adultery to kind of prove a point. Because I remember looking at the time period of Dawood on, they were trying to stone anyone for any reason. And I kind of wonder if Yahusha's example of mercy was kind of like, listen, like, you guys are too happy to stone someone. And it was like a very wicked desire to just like, they would want to stone someone for anything. And so I kind of wonder if that was part of it, part of why he, said he who is without sin throw the first stone. If part of that was kind of like going back to their culture of at a point in time they were stoning like left and right people for any little reason. And he was trying to make a point of you always have the option for mercy. Now in this situation it's different. It's Daud did nothing wrong for them to stone him. But there's been times where Yashrel, at this point in time and further on, there's less and less mercy being used in Yashrel. There's like, you just basically you have no mercy. You just do, the letter of the law, and that's it. And there's no, at some point in time, Israel was not showing mercy to any of to each other and all that. So, let me see here. So it talks about let's see here. Did I finish the verse here? I think I did. Strengthen himself. Yeah. And Daud said to Abiathar the priest, the son of Amalek, bring the ephod to me. And Daud inquired of Yahuwah, saying, shall I pursue after this troop or after this army? Shall I overtake them? And he said, pursue. For you shall surely overtake them, and you shall surely rescue the captives. So we see here, before Brother Yahusha, I'm going to let him chime in here. I just wanted to say, we see here that this is an important thing. When they go to war, they want to make sure that Yahuwah is with them and that they're not doing something or operating outside his will, especially when going to war. Go ahead, brother.
Scroll up to verse 8.
Yeah.
Or actually, I could have used 9 too, but I didn't see the. Okay, so if you look at the at David's name, right? You have a perfect example of the. I just caught that in the KJV 1611. The V is a U.
Yeah, that's why I think like there can only be two possible pronunciation is the one you use and the one I use. I don't think you could get David or Dawid from the Paleo. There's no way to get that. You would have Daoud, and that's really it. Like, or Daoud is really the only pronunciation you could get, even from English. from the Old English or the Middle English. The V doesn't come about. I forget how long it takes for the V to come about. I think it's almost as late in our English language as we get the J. I would have to look that up when the U became a V. Let me actually see here real quick.
Even
Well,
with that word overtake instead of overtake and recorder instead of recover. That's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, so it looks like the U was universally a V back then, is what it looks like. Because almost every time you see a V in the modern ones, it has a U there. Like right here, recover has the U. Let me see here. When did the U turn into a V in the English language? Probably find this out. I know that for Hebrew is very late that they turned it into a V. According to many sources that people have looked into, the V was like very late, like Masoretic time period, or possibly a little bit before that. You still had the U pronunciation for the Paleo. I think even in the Samaritan text, it was still a U, not a V. So let me just see here. This is some blog from Quora.com. Latin did not have separate letters, V and U, originally, according to this person. For that matter, separate letters I and J. They were various styles of handwriting in use in the Roman Empire. Interesting. So even in Latin, I and J were not two separate letters. V and U were not two separate letters. But the most familiar style is okay. So far, that's what I'm seeing, is that at some point in time, historically, they became separate letters. And supposedly, I guess the certain letters were, no longer being used, especially in the Paleo Hebrew. Certain sounds and letters were not being used anymore. You got W. Supposedly, the theory with the W in the Hebrew language is you had two ua or u sounds to get a W. And I'm trying to think. I think the vowel points created the V in the Hebrew language as well. And so I think similarly in the English and Latin type of languages, you had, even though there were these letters like V and J, they were not a separate sound. So, for example, like a I in English was actually, if you trace it back, a I in Latin or English had a y sound.
Yeah.
You know, so and I think even in Greek it did too, possibly. Like for Ezekiel, it had IE to start out the Ezekiel's name in Greek would be it'd be like Ezekiel, because there's a Iezekeiel. So if that's true, that Latin with the IE together makes a y sound, you have Ezekiel. So just for example, and then when you look at Yahuwah's name in the older Bibles, Iehouah, Yahuwah. So it goes back to the Latin, how the Latin would enunciate a I, what we would call an I in English, as a y sound.
Right, like Yitzhak and all that.
Yeah,
stuff.
like basically a Y sound is what it makes.
Yeah.
So yeah, just a little language rabbit trail there. But yeah, if you look at older King James's, it shows how David's original name was supposed to be pronounced, it seems like, or at least how the Masoretes believed it was pronounced. Even in their own version of the Hebrew, it would have been Daoud, not Dawid or David. how a lot of the modern Jews will say David.
Mhm.
It's not correct because you have DAU
Mhm.
even in the 1611. So DAU in the original Hebrew, that's Daud. That's how they said his name. So anyway, but so that's why I personally, in my opinion, I side with the Daoud thing versus the Dawid and David, and however the Masoretic, pro-Masoretic people want to pronounce it. Go ahead, bro.
Yeah, but you see, when you add a little tittle here and a little jot here,
Yeah. Yeah, I guess they didn't, well, they don't believe in Matthew 5, so they don't believe when in what Yahusha says in Matthew 5. He says no jot or tittle
Mhm.
shall pass. So, and how Deuteronomy 4 says do not add or take away
Mhm.
and all that. But yeah. So let's see. I think we were at verse 7 with Abiathar the priest. Possibly, no, we were at actually verse 8. That's right. We were at verse 8. Daud inquired of Yahuwah, shall I pursue after this army? Shall I overtake them? He said, pursue, for you shall surely overtake them. You shall surely rescue the captives. So Daud, he went and 600 men with him. They came as far as the brook Besor. Interesting. So would this mom be an Edom? So it's Besor, right? So I wonder if this
Yeah.
is an Edom, or maybe that's a different place. Besor, Bosor might not be the same place.
Mhm.
Go ahead, brother Yahusha. Because it says Besor.
no, sorry.
Besor, Besor, Besor. Where was Besor? I'm gonna look this up because I've never. Oh no, it's completely different place. Okay, so it's in the Ravine Brook, on the west southwest of Judah. Okay. All right. So it's on the southwest side of the town of Yehuda.
Mhm.
That's where it is. I'm going to take a little copy and paste this link so that I can share it with those that are interested about that. But
Mhm.
yeah. Uh okay. And he pursued them. You okay, Mom?
Yeah.
With 400 and 200 men remained behind, who um who tarried on the other side of the brook of Besor. Okay, Besor. Okay. They found the Egyptian in the field and they took him and brought him to Daud. And they gave him bread and he ate and they caused him to drink water. They gave him a piece of cake of figs. He ate and his spirit was restored in him, for he had not eaten bread
Mhm.
and not drinking water 3 days and 3 nights. Interesting.
Mhm.
That's interesting. Daud said to him, to whom do you, and where are you from? And the young man, the Egyptian, said, I am a servant of Amalek, and my master left me because I was taken ill 3 days ago. And we made an incursion on the south of the Kerethites and on the parts of Yehuda and on the south of Caleb. And we burned Ziklag with fire. So that's interesting. So Caleb had a city, seems like named after him.
Mhm.
So that's First Samuel 30:14. Town of Caleb. And Daoud said to him, will you bring me down to this troop? And he said, swear now to me by Allah that you will not kill me and that you will not deliver me into the hands of my master, and I will bring down upon this troop. So brought him down there, behold, and they were scattered abroad upon the face of the whole land, eating and drinking and feasting by reason of all the great spoils which they had taken out of the land of the Philistines, out of the land of Yehuda. And Daud came upon them and attacked them from morning till evening and on the next day, and not one of them escaped except 400 young men who were mounted on camels and fled. And Daud recovered all that the Amalekites had taken. He rescued both his wives. Nothing was lacking to them, great or small. Either of the spoils or of the sons or daughters or anything that they had taken of theirs, and Daud recovered all. He took all the flocks and herds and led them away before the spoils. And it was said of these spoils, these are the spoils of Daud. And Daud came to the 200 men and were left behind, that they should not follow after Daud. He caused them to remain by the brook of Besor, and they came to meet Daud and to meet this people with him. And Daud drew near to the people. They asked him how he did it. And every ill-disposed and that's interesting, wicked man of the soldiers who had gone with Daud answered and said, because they did not pursue together with us, we will not give them of the spoils which we have recovered. Only let each one lead away with his wife and his children, and let them return. Daud said, you shall not do so after Yahuwah has delivered to us and guard us. Yahuwah has delivered into our hands the troop that came against you. Who will hearken to these your words? For they are not inferior to us. For according to the portion of him that went down to the battle, so shall be portion of him that abides with the baggage. They shall share alike. And it came to pass from the day forward that it became an ordinance and a custom in Yashua until this day. And Daud came to Ziklag and sent of the spoils to the elders of Yehuda and to his friends, saying, behold, spoil of the spoils of the enemies of Yahuwah, to those in Bethel, and to those in Ramoth of the south, and those in Yatir, to those in Aror, and those in Sif Muf, and to those in Safi, and to those in Eshtemoa, and to those in Gath, and those in Semoth, and to those in Safek. Sorry.
Rookie.
Those in Tamoth. Jeez, man. Allergies are out today. All right, so there seems to be a little bit missing here. I'm noticing here. So, let's see here. So the LXX here has like a part 2 to this. It has mentioning Gath, Semoth, Safek, and Tamoth. Now, I don't think the Masoretic or others have that part of verse 28. What the LXX is doing here, or the Complete Apostles Bible does here, is they put it as like a first part to verse 29. And it goes on to say, and to those in Carmel, and to those in the cities of Yermiel, and to those in the cities of the Kenites. Interesting. So that would be Caleb's tribe, the Kenites, or where he was grafted in from. To those in the Yarimuf, to those in Beersheba, and to those in Numbe, and those in Hebron, and to all the places which Daud and his men had passed through. Okay. So that's about it for chapter 30 here. Since this is a short reading today, I think we're going to go straight to Brother Dennis here if he wants. Brother Dennis, would you like to read chapter 31 for us?
Real quick before you go to that,
Okay.
I think it's interesting that you have it says he sent of the spoils to the elders of Yehuda and to his friends. That verse that second part of 20, the second part it's not in the Masoretic. One of those places, it's Gath, Samath, Saphak, and Tamath. One of those places being Gath. I think it's interesting that he has friends in Philistia.
Mm-hmm.
And they removed
Yeah.
that.
Mm. Yeah.
It is interesting, yeah.
Yeah, I want to see. I think it's in the latter part of 28 is where they put it, but they label it as 29. So I'm assuming it's 29A is what they're labeling it as there. Yeah. What's interesting is, yeah, okay. So the Bretons puts it in blue parentheses here. Okay. Yeah. So they put Breton includes it as part of 28. So what it does is it gives you like a little parentheses of 30 verse 29 in 28 there where I guess he's trying to indicate where he would just go into the next verse talking about Gath and Simath, Safek, and Tamath. Yeah. Yeah.
They weren't told to wipe out the Philistines, right? Because the Philistines weren't Canaanites; they were.
Yeah. They're like, it's weird. They're not Canaanites, but they're of the same family. They're as far as
They're from
like,
Mitzrayim, aren't they?
yeah, they're from Mitzrayim, but Mitzrayim came from Ham. So it's weird. They're like separate families, but they have a common ancestor. They have Ham, and then Ham begets Canaan, but Ham also begets Mitzrayim. And so they're like almost like cousins.
Right.
And I guess you could say maybe because Yahuwah didn't curse all of Ham, that they're not commanded to wipe them out because they're not part of Canaan, to your point. So they're cousins though, technically. They're like they would be the African giants, they would be the Hamite Mitzrayim line would be Philistine, if I'm not mistaken. Before Brother Dennis reads, let me just show you what I'm talking about here. Genesis 10. So when we get to Ham's line here we go. So the sons of Ham were Cush, Mitzrayim, Put, and Canaan. Sons of Cush were Seba, Havilah. So verse 6 in Genesis 10 for the viewers and listeners there says that Cush, Mitzrayim, Put, and Canaan all were sons of Ham. So basically, like, even though Yahuwah doesn't command them to utterly wipe them out, they would be like cousins to the Canaanites and the Amorites and all that. They would be like possibly even closer. I would have to correct myself. Possibly like brothers. Like kind of how like they say that the Edomites and the Israelites are brothers. It's almost like that. It's almost as close as that because you have it would seem that Cush and Mitzrayim are brothers. So you would have their lineages being closely linked, and then you have Put and Canaan. So Cush is obviously Ethiopia. That's what Cush became. So Ethiopians were Hamites, and the Egyptians were Hamites. So they would be very close together. And then you have the Canaanites who are also of that Ham lineage. And so you know, they're very closely knit together. Go ahead, brother Yahusha.
Not to take us too far off track, but while it's on my mind, since we're in this chapter, what are your thoughts as far as, because yeah, it seems like Canaan wasn't even the oldest son, if that's put in the correct lineage, right? Why do you think Canaan was cursed and not Cush, Mitzrayim, Put? You know, it's not like he cursed Ham. He cursed Ham's youngest son, it seemed.
Yeah, yeah. If it's going in like you said, if it's going in chronological order of the sons, yeah. If that is chronological order, which I don't know because it's just listing the sons, and it's not saying first or second or whatever. I'm trying to think. Well, I wonder when he was born. If he was born from what happened with Ham, I could see why. Um, because then he would be a bastard child technically. Um, and not just that, a bastard child from a incestuous.
You think that he actually slept with his mother rather than just looking at her naked?
Yeah, I think there's there. Not saying I know for a fact, but we're speaking of hypotheticals, right? So hypothetically, if he is the youngest, there's enough time for him to uncover his dad's nakedness, i.e., according to the book of Leviticus, means he slept with his dad's wife, and would have, aka his mother, his mother, it would be him sleeping with his own mother. And now you get a bastard child from that union. I could see why Yahuwah would inspire Noah to curse Canaan, even if he is the youngest. He's from a forbidden union, and saying, you know what, curse be Canaan, and that whole curse that's given to him.
Yahuwah would have, if that was the case hypothetically, then the original curse, like Yahuwah wouldn't have said, or Noah wouldn't have said, cursed be Canaan, but rather cursed be the seed, because they wouldn't have known the name at the time, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think also we got to realize too that Masha's writing it. So
Right.
he's writing it from a third person perspective, right? So he's writing it as like a historical backdrop. So possibly why he writes it as Canaan, like mentioning Canaan's name, is because that's who, that child becomes, or who he gets named as. So we also have to realize too that even the original scriptures, Yahuwah gave like firsthand to Masha, and Masha's writing. A lot of the stuff he writes is from his perspective. So from his perspective, he obviously would name what that child would be named. So a lot of that stuff has to do with what people falsely attribute as historical vernaculisms, or whatever they want to call it, where he's basically giving historical info in the context of things that already happened. Like you said, at the time that it's happening, Noah would not know what Canaan would be named if Canaan's the youngest. Canaan would, and if he was birthed from that union, obviously he wouldn't be born yet. This is all speculation at this point. We really don't have any information when Canaan was born, when, if he is the youngest. That's something I would like to look into, even with the Jewish traditions out there, like who was the youngest of Ham's sons. Because if it's going in chronological order, you have Ham to Cush, one generation, right? You have got Cush to Mitzrayim, one generation. Not exactly successing generations, but you have Ham to Cush. Mitzrayim seems to be like the second oldest, right? If we're right about this being chronological here. And then you have Canaan as the very last son of Ham. So of that initial lineage. So that would mean that Ham did not have Canaan right away, which would give time to my theory that Canaan is a product of an incestuous, like he's like the first Tammuz, basically.
Yeah.
In I'm not trying to be mean here, but technically Canaan would be a type of Tammuz.
Yeah, yeah.
And according to, what happened with the Babylonian legends and stuff like that about Nimrod. And it kind of makes sense why Nimrod has a predisposed yearning to want to marry his own mother. It kind of makes sense because now you have what's known as spirits, what they call today as familiar spirits, a spirit that attaches one generation to the next. So if Ham did do that, it would make sense why, a couple generations later, now what would be his grandson? Nimrod would be his grandson,
I guess so.
Ham's grandson, because I think he's the great grandson of Noah. So he
Right.
would be the grandson of Ham. So Ham's grandson later on, a couple generations later, does the same thing and, gets a son of an incestuous marriage. And so it's very possible. I think either way, going back to the sin of Ham, it has to be that he uncovered his dad's nakedness. It can't be he just looked at his dad naked. And now his dad is about to pronounce judgment on his about to be son. That to me, it's like there's something missing from that narrative if it's just he saw his dad naked and made fun of him.
I never thought he looked at his dad. When I see
Yeah.
when I see the nakedness part, I see if your nakedness is your wife's nakedness.
Yeah.
So I always looked at it as he looked at his mother.
Oh, okay. Okay, yeah. I got you, yeah. Because some people will just take it literally from the English and will say, well, he saw his dad naked, so that's why he got cursed. Because I remember being taught that in the church. I'm like,
Yeah, no,
it doesn't make sense.
Doesn't make sense at all.
To me, the little more likely scenario is he slept with his dad's wife, and like what Dan did, and we see, was it Dan or Reuben?
Reuben.
Reuben. What Reuben did would make way more sense, and it seems like that type of spirit seems to follow after Yashrael, even from the
Mhm.
time of Reuben. There seems to be a pattern where Reuben screws up, Ham screws up. Now Nimrod has this spirit in him that he's almost what is the word I'm looking for? He's almost inclined, or like how people have an alcoholic spirit in their
Yeah,
family.
yeah.
It's like it's a type of sin that sticks around in your family that is passed down generationally, like a curse.
Generational curse. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, Reuben had it. It skipped a couple generations. Then now it seems to go to Ham. And well, actually, no. Let me correct
But
myself.
the
That
other way
would
around.
be after Ham.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
Ham would have been the first, and then at some point you have, it passed down to Nimrod, and then from Nimrod,
Mhm.
that spirit still
Lingered. Yeah.
lingered and gets to Reuben. So it's kind of interesting when you look at the lineage of even Shem and Ham, how that type of spirit seems to linger around.
Mhm.
That type of spirit of perversion, or whatever you want to call it, spirit of adultery, is just lingering around and it's kind of passing from one to another. But the main reason I believe it was adultery was the sin of Ham was because when we look later on in scripture, it's almost the universal definition of seeing someone's nakedness or
Mhm.
uncovering someone's nakedness is having their wife like in bed.
Mhm.
That's essentially, whether it's your mother, whether it's just your dad's wife, it's universally in the book of Leviticus especially
Oh yeah.
is defined as adultery.
Oh
It's
yeah.
defined as not just adultery, but sleeping with your dad's wife. And that seems to be what the universal definition for it in the Tanakh. Just like to understand the sons of Elohim in Genesis 6, right? We have to go to what does that phrase mean all where else in the Tanakh. That's kind of what the seminaries call exegesis, and they call, line upon line and stuff like that. When you look at cultural terminology, you got to look at what did it mean to them, not what it means in our English or how it sounds in the English. Because a lot of the times we try to look at verses like that translated into English. Oh, he saw his dad naked. It's like, what? Like, so, his child's going to get cursed because of that. doesn't really make much sense. But if he slept with his dad's wife, especially his mother, now you have uncovered his dad's nakedness and sleeping with your own mother. Creepy is just creepy and incestuous. Freudian, if you want to use
Yeah,
modern terminology,
true.
with Sigmund Freud and all that. Okay, so that type of spirit could have been lingering somewhere after the flood, and and it's kind of confusing. I know I was messing up with the chronology and stuff with Nimrod and all that, but the point is that you have this spirit that it latches on. It seems to latch on from Ham to Nimrod to Reuben. You seem to Israel always had a problem with that. Even Paul's like, you guys do what the pagans don't do. You would have your
Yeah,
father's wife.
yeah.
Even Paul talking about in the first century, he's like, it seems to be a lingering problem with Yashrael throughout history. That
We're sicker than even the pagans.
incestuous type of spirit seems to be a problem.
Generational curses.
Yeah,
That's right.
So
That's right.
that's what I personally believe. I could be wrong, but
Uh-huh.
that's what I see from
I think you're
Leviticus.
right.
That's what I see from all these other parts of the Tanakh of what that phrase means. But anyway, so yeah, the reason I pointed that out though, and it was a very good rabbit trail we actually went on. It was very necessary.
No, it was good. Yeah.
Mainly the reason I pointed out Genesis 10:6 was about the whole. Yes, they're not Canaanites, but they're like cousins or brothers. They're
Mhm.
the Philistines are from Ham, so they're not that far removed from the Canaanites. But I think it was because if you look at that curse Yahuwah made, to Brother Yahusha's point, Yahuwah only cursed Canaan. He did not. Now, this is something that if you know anything about the BHI movement, they try to say that all of Ham is cursed. That's actually incorrect. The whole Ham lineage is not cursed. Canaan, who comes from Ham, is cursed. So that means that if you're not of the Canaan lineage, you're not cursed. So Mitzrayim was not cursed. Put was not cursed. And so the Philistines come from Mitzrayim, by the way, just for anyone that's wondering, because I know it gets confusing with all that. But I believe it actually tells you here that I'm trying to remember what verse it says. It talks about that the Philistines came from Mitzrayim. I would have to look that up real quick. What verse? I know it's in Genesis 10. It says that the Mitzrites, the Philistines came from the Mitzrites. So Philistines came from the Mitzrites. Let me see here. I know it's in Genesis 10. I just gotta see. All right, so for some reason it pops back up later on. This is where it says it in verse 13 to 14. And Mitzrayim begot Ludim, Naphtuhim, Enetim, and the Lahabim, and Pathrusim and Kazluhim, from whom the Philistines came. So, like, basically, the Philistines were like, would that be like great? I guess they would be great grandchildren of Mitzrayim. Let me see here. You got Mitzrayim. He begot Ludim and the Naphtahim and the Pathruhim. Oh no, okay. So they would just be grandchildren of Mitzrayim. Okay. Yeah, so the Philistines came from the Kazluhim, who were descendants of Mitzrayim. So that's how they came about. So that's in Genesis 10, 13 to 14. So that's how they go back to Ham. So, yeah. All right. Well, my bad, Brother Dennis, for making you wait a little too long there.
Oh, that's okay. It's good to have a little history there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's always good to have that. All right, whenever you're ready, bro.
Okay, chapter 31. The Philistines were fighting against Yisrael, and the men of Yisrael fled from before the Philistines and fell slain on Mount Gilboa. And the Philistines followed hard after Shaul and his sons. The Philistines smote Jonathan, and Abinadab, and Melchishua, sons of Shaul. And the battle went hard against Shaul, and the archers hit him, so that he was severely wounded by the archers. And Shaul said to his armor bearer, "Draw your sword and thrust me through with it, lest these uncircumcised men come and thrust me through and roll themselves on me." But his armor bearer would not, for he was greatly afraid. So Shaul took the sword and fell on it. And when his armor bearer saw that Shaul was dead, he also fell on his sword and died with him. Thus Shaul died, and 3 of his sons and his armor bearer, also all his men together on that day. And they saw the men of Yisrael who were beyond the valley, and those who were beyond the Yarden, that the men of Yisrael had fled, and that Shaul and his sons were dead. So they forsook the cities and fled, and the Philistines came and dwelt in them. And the next day it came to be, when the Philistines came to strip the slain, that they found Shaul and his 3 sons fallen on Mount Gilboa. And they cut off his head and stripped off his armor, and sent word throughout the land of the Philistines to announce it in the house of their idols and to the people. And they placed his armor in the house of the Ashtaroth, and they fastened his body to the wall of Beth Shan. And the inhabitants of Yabesh Gilead heard what the Philistines had done to Shaul. And all the brave men arose and went all night and took the body of Shaul and the bodies of his sons from the wall of Beth Shan. And they came to Yabesh and burned them there. And they took their bones and buried them under the tamarisk tree at Yabesh, and fasted for 7 days. I wonder what they meant by they were talking about he didn't want the uncircumcised to kill him and then roll themselves over him. I don't know.
I think it's with the heathen being uncircumcised and the Abarit being circumcised. I would look at it as Shaul looking at himself as culturally higher than these Philistines. So like, don't let these dogs kill me. You know, don't let these heathen kill me.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounded almost like they were going to abuse a corpse.
There's some sick people in the world, man.
That's very true.
Yes, there are.
I think it's interesting difference. The Masoretic has, and they cut off his head and stripped off his armor, and the Septuagint just has they treated him scornfully. I could
Yeah.
I could see them cutting, even though it's in the Masoretic. I could see them cutting off his head, though. You know, if Yashar first cut off the head of their champion Goliath, I could see that as like repayment.
Well, there was a specific reason why David knew he had to cut off the giant's head.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, the giant would have come back to life again, having the third helix.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, like really with any type of being that you're trying to kill or any type of animal, the head would be the surest way to make sure it's dead. Um, you know, because if you say even with like let's say a lion, you're being attacked by a lion, right? You probably want to cut off its head because if you just stab a lion with a sword, there's no telling
Yeah.
how if it's going to pierce through fully enough,
Mm-hmm.
where it's not going to still be able to attack you. So yeah,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true.
so that's probably the easiest way. But yeah, I've seen that. I've seen that even in the mythologies with the giants. They kind of portray the same thing. You have to cut their head off to fully kill them. Trying to remember, I think it was the Percy Jackson movies that showed Kronos. The only way to kill him was to chop his head off, and all of that. Even though it's more of like a evil versus evil thing, because Percy Jackson is basically a Nephilim son of Poseidon, basically killing Kronos, but it's kind of like the same concept. I think in all like the Hercules stories, it was the same thing. Hercules had to chop off the only being that he couldn't kill was Hydra, because Hydra just kept growing its necks back. You had like 8-headed dragon that just kept regenerating its neck and its head, supposedly. So, yeah, but yeah, definitely cutting the head off will definitely usually kill whatever you're trying to kill. Usually, that's a sure way to do that. Let me see here. So the archers found him. Yeah, I think it was solid to Brother Yahusha's point. I don't think he had anything to do with righteousness about the circumcised. They started looking at the uncircumcised like they were beneath them. From what I remember, because doesn't Shaul say, Mom, at some point, doesn't he tell like his armor bearer or whatever to kill him because he doesn't want the uncircumcised to kill him?
I think so.
So he looks at like the Philistines like they're beneath him.
You're right. Yeah.
It's kind of like a pharisaical spirit. He looks at the Philistines like, oh, they're nowhere equal to me. I don't want them to kill me. I don't want to be killed by the Philistines. So it's more of like a supremacist demon that's in him.
Like a Nicolaitans spirit.
Yeah.
You want to do since it's still kind of early, those short chapters, you want to do an extra chapter?
Yeah, sure.
That would be 2 Samuel.
That's interesting. Glad tidings to their huh. Okay. Sending round glad tidings to their idols. That's interesting. So interesting. Something I want to talk about before we get into the next chapter. So this is what I mean by like they always recycle their mighty ones. It always gets recycled. The Philistines worshipped Astaroth, it seems like. So this is kind of interesting because Astaroth would have been what, Mama, Sidonian name? That would have been what, Tyre? That if I'm not mistaken, let me actually look that up. I think that was her name in Sidon. Let me see here. Because I remember Oh, she thought there's a code. Sister Marissa thought there was a code. No. It's let me just get her the number. No, there's no code. Let me see here. So meeting ID is 5.
It says Astarte or Astarte was the mighty one of the Sidonians.
Yeah, so you would have somehow her same name is being used by the Philistines, which is weird because
Not quite the same name. Astarte versus Ashtaroth.
okay.
Ashtaroth for Phoenicia and Astarte for the Sidonians.
So
And a lot of times they would
Phoenicia.
they like to change their names a little bit, so others couldn't use their names against them. It's strange.
Okay, so yeah, so Ashtaroth would have been so the Phoenicians, I guess the Phoenicians were close to the Sumerians then. Yeah, so this is kind of interesting. So I'm wondering if the Philistines took over Phoenicia at some point then. It's kind of interesting. So, yeah, I just find it interesting they used the same name as the Phoenicians used for her. So this shows that like all these nations when they conquest, they usually take over the other nations' mighty ones and all that. So, just wanted to point that out. Shabbat Shalom, Sister Marissa.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Hi, Joshua.
Hey,
Hey.
How
how
are
you
you?
doing?
Good. Hi, Brother Dennis.
Hello, shalom.
Shalom, shalom, Sister
Hi.
Sharon.
Hi, Sister Marissa. How are you?
I'm well, thank you so much.
Good.
So, Brother Doug was going to explain to me
Yeah.
a statement that I sent him earlier today. I was listening to a study about Passover and how is it possible that Abba is offended by those who don't observe it on the day that some think it should be observed, and how do we know that the date that we observe it is the correct date when everybody has all these different calendars?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. I would say the calendar is not, I don't think, as much of his worry as us actually doing it the right way. I would say Colossians 2:16. Also, what we don't realize a lot of the times, I sent you a screenshot, sis, of a really good article that I want to send to you. Even though it's done by a Christian, surprisingly, they're pro Torah. And he talks about how the article talks about the historical context of that day is that you had these certain groups like the Gnostics that would come around telling these believers, the Nazarene, feasting's bad, you're being a glutton. Don't drink, you're being a drunkard. And they would wrongfully judge them. And basically the historical context is the Gnostics were against what Paul is talking about in Colossians 2:16-17. So when he says let no one judge you, he's talking about those that are outsiders, those that are not in the body of Messiah, because Gnostics are not real believers. They're they flip the Bible upside down the majority of the time. So they're not.
But people don't see it that way. They're reading the context of the scriptures and they're interpreting it where it says, and do not judge you by feast or Shabbats. So that's why people think, oh, so you can't judge me if I do my Shabbat on a Wednesday. and you can't judge me if I do my feast after a certain date. So that's why this person was saying that that's the scripture that people use for their agenda.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
for their,
Yeah. I would say it's a very bad interpretation in my opinion, because number one, Paul in the very next verse, if you look at the two verses together, the very next verse he clarifies who he means by who can only judge, and he says, but the body of Messiah. He says it very clear. So if they were to read verse 17 with 16, they would understand Paul's talking historically about those that are not even real professing believers in Yahusha. He's talking about those that are outsiders, whether it's the heathen, pagans, whether it's the Gnostics. They would judge these people for doing these things. And if we start interpreting it like that, no offense, we're no better than a Christian. If we start interpreting it that way, twisting a scripture like that to interpret it that way. Also, there's places in scripture where Yahuwah would rebuke Israel for keeping false Sabbaths. I'll just go to one verse and then I'll let Brother Yahusha. It looks like he has his hand up. So I'm just going to show you to give to people like that. This is a proof that Yahuwah does care what day we keep his Sabbath on. Okay, let me see here if I can find it real quick in the book of Amos, where he's actually warning against those that would, he's rebuking his own people for adopting false Sabbaths. Let me see here. Amos, where is this on this?
Brother Doug, you know how people say, well, you know, we have to be loving to those that are outside of the Torah keeping community, because how are we going to be able to win them over if we don't embrace their theology or their understanding, even though they're wrong in their thinking, but we have to compromise so that, you know, how Paul said.
That's
because you know what they do? So they use a scripture where Paul says that he would like to be like his brothers, you know, he can become a Greek or whatever. So that's the scripture that people use and say, oh, but look, Paul says he wants to be like them so he can win them over.
We're no better than Christians then, like I just said. We're no better than Christians because they twist and manipulate that verse for the same type of understanding. So have we left the church? That's what I would question when someone says that to me. Not to attack them, but like, have you left the source? Are you fully out? Has Yahuwah called you out because you're still holding on to things, interpretations that only the church would teach? No one else would read that way. He's saying, I'm going to the Gentiles as a Gentile, meaning I'm come meeting them where they are. Like, the Gentiles don't know the Torah, so am I going to witness to a Gentile using the Tanakh? No, I'm going to go to a Gentile using their own wisdom against them. So, for example, like if I was witnessing right to a pagan, am I going to start with the commands of the Torah and the law? No, I'm going to start with what is their philosophy, and I'm going to combat their philosophy and use it against them and show them how in their own philosophy, they have a concept of sin. In their own philosophy, they have a concept of what's wrong and what's right. Like kind of what Ray Comfort used to do in a similar way. I would come to them as them, not that I am becoming a Gentile, but that I'm going down to their level to witness to them. That's what Paul's talking about. He's talking about preaching the good news. He's not talking about, I'm going to start eating pork to be like a Gentile, or I'm going to start, I'm going to start being Kabbalistic to witness to a Messianic Jew. That's not what he meant. And so like that would be my first response to this is like, have we come out of her? We can't be misinterpreting these scriptures like Christianity does. And I understand what you're saying, the context of the verse itself, but with Paul's letters, you have to understand there's historical context that we are not raised with. There's historical context to every letter that he's talking about. Paul's usually mainly dealing with the themes of of Gnostic heresy, denying the resurrection. Those are the themes he's dealing with a lot of the assemblies that he writes to. With the Corinthians, they started to listen to heresies and they were falling away from the resurrection. With the and they also were listening to the Gnostics about, well, feasting is now that they're telling them feasting is gluttony. You're being a glutton. You're being sinful to eat. Also, if you actually research the Gnostics, and Brother Yahusha, who has his hand up, he could tell you more about the Gnostics and their beliefs, because he was part of an assembly that had similar esoteric belief systems like the Gnostics. They would believe in Pro Torah, but they believed everything was spiritual. Everything was, you're resting now, you're resting in Yahusha, but not physically. You don't have to keep a Sabbath, you just do it spiritually. Like how the Christians say we're resting in Jesus, that's a Gnostic doctrine. What people don't realize is there's a lot of Gnosticism in the church. So the reason why we get all these weird understandings is because there's a Gnostic spirit there. And that's why people are, as far as Colossians 2:16 goes, to 17 goes, Paul reaffirms in the very next verse who he's talking about, who he says can judge and who cannot judge. He says, but the body of Messiah. He says it right there. So anyone that wants to argue, you're not taking scripture in context. You're not looking at what the word literally says. And so Paul's also talking about those that would come against keeping the new moons, the Sabbaths, and the feast days, not those that are for keeping those. It says in regard, meaning in regard to you doing these things. Don't let people say you shouldn't be doing these things. That's the point, not how you're keeping them. There's no context in that for that. But go ahead, brother Yahusha. I know you've been waiting.
No worries. I think that when you're talking with people that are, coming up with, using this and using this and using this, usually they turn to Shaul. Like that's their only defense. And I think what Darianel used to say is, is not discrediting Shaul by any means, but Shaul is not my Messiah. You go to the writings of Yahusha, very clearly, he says to keep the Torah. Just Matthew 5:17 alone, 17 to 21, just throws out any anti-Torahism, just right off the bat, and it's clear, word for word, clear as day. So if Shaul's writings don't agree with that, then you need to throw Shaul out, which we know Shaul's writings do agree with that, so that's not what I'm saying. But normally, sorry, go ahead.
But a lot of people are starting to renounce Shaul because obviously they don't understand his writings, they don't understand what he's trying to say. So a lot of people that I knew, they decided that, Shaul is a heretic, and that he wants to take the place of Yahushua, because they don't. I mean, if you don't understand what he's trying to say, you're going to come across as interpreting what he's saying as trying to be like Lord over other people. That's why there's a movement now of a lot of people in Torah that are actually renouncing Shaul, which is very dangerous, obviously, right?
Yeah. So, we're going to continue this conversation, but what we're going to do is end the recording for all those out there. What I'll try to do is I'll put / on the title / commentary about Passover and the feast. So, I just want to say we're very thankful for all of the viewers and listeners that tuned in for this long, but we're going to continue this because this is probably going to be a long topic. So we're going to continue this off the record. If you guys want more questions to what Marissa was asking on the record here, please feel free to reach out to our ministry. I'll try to help you out, or one of us will try to help you out as best we can to our own knowledge. And have a great rest of your Shabbat of all of our viewers and listeners out there. Shabbat.